"Mom," he finally says, voice flat, rehearsed. "We need to talk." Something in the way he says it sends a small shiver down my spine. I set down the basting brush, my hand trembling slightly, and look at him, trying to read his face. Tyler stands in the doorway, coat still on, eyes avoiding mine, a distance in him that feels like a canyon has opened overnight. "Of course," I manage, forcing a smile that feels fragile and inadequate. "What's wrong? Did something happen to Rachel? The kids?" He shakes his head. "No, everyone's fine. But we're not staying for dinner." I blink, confused. The words hang in the air, impossibly heavy. "Not staying? What do you mean?" I ask, trying to keep my voice light, hoping this is some misunderstanding. "None of us are coming," he says, emotionless, like he's reading from a script. My heart falters. "None of you?" Tyler glances at the kitchen, at the pies cooling by the window, at the meticulously set table, at the garland of autumn leaves I hung yesterday, and then looks back at me. "We had a family meeting, without you." "Without me?" My voice is barely a whisper. "Yes," he says simply. "Mom, everyone agrees you've been suffocating, always guilt-tripping us, making everything about you." I feel as if someone has pressed a cold hand against my chest, squeezing. I can barely breathe. "Tyler, that's not fair. I only ever wanted to control everything," he cuts in sharply. "To make us feel guilty if we don't call, if we can't visit, if we have our own lives. You don't realize how heavy that feels." I stare at him, at the boy who used to clutch my hand at his father's funeral, whispering, "I'll take care of you, Mom." That boy seems gone. A stranger stands in his place. "I don't understand," I murmur. "Why today? Why now?" "Because it's time," he says flatly. "The truth is, Mom, no one really loves spending time with you anymore. We do it out of obligation." I flinch. My chest tightens, the words wrapping around me like icy chains. The kitchen, filled moments ago with the comforting smell of roasting turkey, now feels suffocating and cold. My voice cracks. "Your sister? Does Emma feel this way too?" Tyler pulls out his phone, scrolling to a message, then turns it toward me. It's from Emma. "Sorry, Mom. Tyler's right. We need space. Please don't contact us for a while. I can't breathe." My hands shake violently as I grip the counter. She texted that to you?" "She asked me to show you," he says, emotionless. "I think it's best if we all take a break. Maybe after Christmas, we'll see where things stand." A faint buzzing fills my ears, my chest tightening with a mix of disbelief and pain. "Tyler," I whisper, barely above a breath. "This isn't you. This isn't my son talking. What's really happening?" He doesn't answer. He checks his watch. "I have to go." I reach for his arm, desperate. "Please, stay. Let's talk. Eat." He pulls away. "Goodbye, Mom." And just like that, he's gone. The door clicks softly behind him. "Hi, my name is Maggie Henderson. I'm 60 years old, a widow. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And today, on Thanksgiving, my family left me all alone." I stand for a long while, the smell of turkey filling a kitchen that suddenly feels empty, alien. My knees give out, and I collapse into the chair at the head of the table. 12 place settings, each meticulously arranged, each with a name written in gold ink. Tyler, Rachel, Jake, Emma, Ben, 12 plates. Not a single person will sit at them. Tears burn my cheeks, a mixture of grief, humiliation, and disbelief. I whisper their names over and over: Tyler, Emma, Rachel, Jake. Memories flood me. The family dinners, the birthdays, the Sunday calls, the Halloween costumes I stayed up all night sewing, the games I watched from the bleachers, cheering louder than anyone. And now, no one wants me. Hours pass. The pies cool completely, Candles burn down to stubs. Outside, the wind sweeps leaves across the porch. My body is hollow, my heart a cavern of silence. I rise finally to clear the untouched dishes, my hands shaking, my body aching. As I push in Tyler's chair, something catches my eye. An envelope. Cream-colored, official-looking, sealed. The return address twists my stomach. Harper and Lane Law Associates. I pick it up, trembling. Robert had handled all our finances. A family trust? I had never known. My fingers hover over the flap, hesitant, but I cannot face it yet. Not tonight. Not now. I set it back on the counter beside the cold coffee and untouched pies. I turn off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the oven. Upstairs, I crawl into bed without changing, still smelling of turkey and tears. Silence presses against me like a living thing, whispering, "No one really loves spending time with you anymore." Tyler's voice loops in my head, cruel and unrelenting, until sleep finally claims me, shallow and restless, haunted by empty chairs and the family that walked away. When I wake the next morning, the house is still, cold, and that envelope remains on the counter, waiting to tell me a truth I am not yet ready to face. The days after Thanksgiving came and went in fragments, blurred edges of hours that felt stitched together by silence and grief. Morning turned into night without distinction. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My body moved through the house like a ghost revisiting its own memories. Every room carried an echo. The kitchen smelled faintly of roasted turkey gone sour, the table still half set as if waiting for ghosts to sit down. The living room lamp flickered over family photos. Tyler at age 7, his front teeth missing, Emma in her prom dress, Robert holding them both, smiling in the sunlight. I couldn't bear to look too long. It hurt in ways that had no name. Every few hours, I caught myself asking the same question under my breath. What did I do wrong? I replayed that Thanksgiving conversation like a punishment, searching for clues in every word, every flicker in Tyler's eyes. Maybe I had been too much. Maybe I called too often, worried too loudly, loved too deeply. Maybe I'd become a burden without realizing it. By the third day, I stopped cooking entirely. I lived on tea and toast, which mostly went untouched. I tried watching television, reading, cleaning, anything to avoid thinking. But it all led back to that single sentence that had gutted me. No one really loves spending time with you anymore. On Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. I froze. When I opened it, Dorothy was standing there, bundled in her winter coat, holding a bag of muffins from the bakery downtown. Her face said everything before she even spoke: concern, anger, heartbreak. "Oh, Maggie," she breathed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been calling you for days. You didn't answer." I shrugged weakly. Didn't feel like talking. She set the muffins on the counter and turned to me. "You look pale. Have you eaten?" I gave a small, humorless laugh. Ate my pride, if that counts. Dorothy shook her head, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I still can't wrap my head around it. Tyler and Emma, after everything you've done for them, it doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense to them," I murmured, my fingers tracing the edge of the counter. "I've apparently been suffocating them, guilt-tripping, making everything about me." "That's nonsense," she snapped. "You're the most selfless person I know. Tyler worshipped you after Robert died. Remember how he used to call you every night from college just to make sure you were eating? This isn't him, Maggie. Something's off." Her conviction startled me. For days, I'd been drowning in guilt and shame, but hearing someone else question the narrative cracked something open inside me. A small, fragile sliver of doubt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the monster they'd made me out to be. Dorothy followed my gaze to the envelope still sitting on the kitchen counter, untouched since Thanksgiving night. "What's that?" she asked. I hesitated. "Something that fell out of Tyler's jacket." I didn't mean to keep it. I just couldn't throw it away. May I? She asked softly. I nodded. Dorothy turned it over, her brow furrowing. Harper and Lane Law Associates, Henderson Family Trust? She looked up at me. Did you know about this? No, I whispered. Robert never mentioned any kind of trust. We weren't wealthy people. We lived comfortably, but— Open it, she urged. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single-page letter printed on crisp ivory paper. The words blurred at first. I had to blink several times before I could make sense of them. To the beneficiaries of the Henderson Family Trust, we are writing to inform you of a forthcoming distribution scheduled for December 26th, following the resolution of the estate of Mr. Charles Henderson. Please note that all beneficiaries must be present for verification prior to release of funds. Details of individual allocations have been redacted for confidentiality. I felt the blood drain from my face. Charles Henderson, I murmured. That was Robert's brother. Dorothy's eyes widened. He passed away, didn't he? I nodded slowly. 6 months ago. Robert barely spoke to him in the last few years, but— Yes. Dorothy's voice dropped. So this means the trust is about his estate. I swallowed hard. And the beneficiaries, Tyler and Emma. The room seemed to tilt. My knees went weak, and I sank into the nearest chair. Dorothy read the letter again, her expression tightening. There's a substantial distribution. That means money, Maggie. A lot of it. Do you think they knew about this? My heart pounded. A family meeting without me. Tyler's sudden cruelty. Emma's cold message. Their need for space. The pieces started clicking into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I need to call the law firm, I said, standing abruptly. I need to know what this is. Dorothy nodded, already reaching for her phone. I'll stay here with you. The woman who answered at Harper and Lane had a polite, practiced voice. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson, she said, after I explained who I was. We're unable to discuss the details of the trust with anyone other than the listed beneficiaries. I'm the widow of Robert Henderson, I insisted. Surely that counts for something. I'm afraid not, ma'am. All inquiries must be made in the presence of all beneficiaries. The call ended with a sterile click. I stared at the silent receiver, my pulse roaring in my ears. Dorothy placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We'll figure this out. That afternoon, she brought her laptop from the car and began searching public records. Her fingers flew across the keys, the blue light reflecting off her glasses. After nearly an hour, she gasped, Maggie, here. Look. On the screen was a probate document. Charles Henderson, deceased, estate valued at approximately $2, $3 million. I sank back, my hands trembling. $2.3 million. Dorothy exhaled slowly. And if the beneficiaries are Tyler and Emma? I didn't let her finish. The nausea hit like a wave. Tyler's words replayed in my mind, cruel and deliberate now in a new light. We had a family meeting. Without you. You make everything about yourself. He hadn't been trying to free himself from me. He'd been trying to cut me out. Oh my God, I whispered. They didn't abandon me because they stopped loving me. They did it because they wanted me out of the way. Dorothy looked stricken. We don't know that for sure. Yes, we do, I said, my voice breaking. You were right. This isn't my children. This is something else, someone else influencing them. Dorothy squeezed my hand. Then we'll find out who. You're not alone, Maggie. I promise. That night I sat in the living room, the letter on the coffee table before me, the fire burning low. I tried to tell myself there must be another explanation, that my children couldn't possibly be so calculating. But the more I thought about it, the more their behavior made sense in the darkest way possible. When I finally stood to turn off the lights, my laptop pinged. A Facebook notification. I frowned, surprised. I hadn't opened Facebook in weeks. It was a message. From Jake. "Grandma, I miss you. Dad took my phone, but I'm using Mom's iPad. He said you're sick and we can't see you. Are you okay? Dad's been really weird lately." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The tears came all at once, burning hot down my cheeks. They hadn't just cut me off. They'd lied to my grandchildren. I stared at Jake's message until the words blurred. My heart broke anew, but this time, underneath the pain, a new feeling began to take root, quiet, fierce, and unyielding. Resolve. Something was terribly wrong, and I was going to find out what. The days that followed Jake's message were unlike any others. The numbness I'd been living in was gone, replaced by a steady, simmering fire beneath my ribs. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I wasn't just mourning the loss of my family. I was determined to understand why they had turned against me so completely. Jake's words replayed over and over in my mind. "Dad said you're sick, that you had a breakdown and need isolation." A breakdown, isolation. Those weren't the words of a misunderstanding. They were the words of a lie crafted with intent. My son wasn't just cutting me out. He was rewriting me into a cautionary tale. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The ticking clock, the creak of the floorboards, the whistle of the wind outside. I sat by the window until dawn, staring at the frost creeping across the glass, thinking about my grandson's confused little face as he typed those words on his mother's iPad. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Dorothy didn't even blink when I told her my plan over coffee. "You're going to see Jake?" she asked. "I have to," I said quietly. "He's the only one still reaching out. And if Tyler's telling him these lies, I need to look that boy in the eyes and remind him who I am." Dorothy pressed her lips together, thinking, "You'll have to be careful. If Tyler finds out—" "I know," I interrupted. "That's why no one can know. Not Emma, not Tyler, not anyone." It felt strange, almost absurd. A 60-year-old woman plotting a secret meeting with her 12-year-old grandson as if we were characters in some kind of spy novel. But that was the reality of my life now. I was a stranger in my own family. I arranged it through Jake's favorite teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, who knew me from years of volunteering at the school library. I told her I wanted to drop off a small Christmas gift, nothing more. When I arrived that afternoon, the December air bit through my coat. Children laughed on the playground, their voices echoing against the brick walls. I waited near the back gate, clutching a small bag of homemade cookies I'd baked that morning, the first thing I'd cooked in weeks. Then I saw him, Jake, taller than I remembered, his sandy hair sticking out from under a red beanie. He froze for a moment when he saw me, then ran straight into my arms. "Grandma," he whispered, hugging me tightly. I held him for as long as I could, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, the warmth of his little body. When he finally pulled back, his face was serious. "Dad said you were sick," he said quietly. "He said you had a breakdown and needed time away from everyone. But you look okay." My heart clenched. "I'm okay, sweetheart," I said softly. "I just think your dad might be confused. Sometimes grown-ups say things they shouldn't when they're upset." Jake frowned. "Dad's been weird lately. He's always whispering with Aunt Emma. And there's this lady who keeps coming over, Veronica. She talks about money and smart choices. I think she's helping them with something about Grandpa's trust." The name stuck in my mind like a thorn. "Veronica?" I repeated. Jake nodded. "Yeah, Veronica Chase. Dad said she's a financial advisor. She tells them not to tell anyone about their plans." A chill ran through me. "Do you know what kind of plans?" He shrugged. "Something about investments. Aunt Emma was crying once after she left, but then Dad said everything would be fine, that it was just business." Before I could ask more, the school bell rang. Jake looked around nervously. "I have to go, Grandma. Please don't tell Dad I saw you. He'll get really mad." I cupped his face in my hands. I won't say a word, I promise. And Jake, never forget, you can always talk to me no matter what anyone says. He nodded, gave me one last quick hug, and ran toward the school doors. As I walked back to my car, my legs felt heavy. Veronica Chase. The name echoed in my head like a warning bell. That evening, Dorothy and I sat at her dining table surrounded by stacks of paperwork, laptops, and half-empty coffee mugs. She typed the name into her computer. After a few moments, she looked up, her expression grim. Found her. Veronica Chase, financial advisor, formerly employed at Silver Oak Wealth Management, fired 2 years ago for unethical practices, currently operating independently. My stomach turned. Unethical how? Dorothy scrolled. She was accused of manipulating elderly clients into signing over financial control under the guise of family protection. No criminal charges, but several civil complaints. The air in the room grew heavy. I leaned back, stunned. So she's doing it again, but this time with my children. Dorothy nodded slowly. It looks that way. And if she's convincing Tyler and Emma that you're unstable or controlling, that would explain why they cut you off. I buried my face in my hands. I can't believe they'd fall for something like that. I raised them to be kind, to think for themselves. Dorothy reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Grief makes people vulnerable. Veronica probably told them you'd waste their inheritance or guilt them into sharing. It's what these people do. They plant fear and greed in equal measure. We kept digging for hours. The deeper we went, the darker it got. Several online reviews mentioned Veronica's aggressive persuasion tactics. One even said she promised clients financial freedom from family drama. By the time we finished, my hands were shaking. She's poisoned them against me, I whispered, all for money. Dorothy looked at me solemnly. Do you know how she's getting paid? I shook my head. She takes a 15% commission on every account she manages, Dorothy said quietly. If Tyler and Emma are each inheriting over $1 million, I did the math in my head. The number made me sick. She's making over $300,000 just by destroying my family. Dorothy's jaw tightened. Then we make sure everyone knows who she really is. But Maggie, listen. Don't fight her with anger. People like her feed on it. You fight her with love. Show your children and this entire town who you really are. Her words sank deep. Love had always been my weapon, my armor, my language. Maybe that was still true, even now, when everything felt broken. Over the next few days, I began to move differently. I went back to the library. I volunteered at the shelter downtown. I started baking again. Cookies for the children's hospital, pies for the church raffle. I didn't talk about my pain. I just lived my truth quietly, hoping somehow it would reach my children through the cracks of whatever Veronica had built around them. But just when I began to feel a small flicker of peace, the universe struck again. It was December 10th when the letter arrived. A thick white envelope with a corporate return address, Henderson and Fields Law Group. My hands trembled as I opened it. Mrs. Margaret Sullivan. This letter serves as formal notice that you are no longer welcome at any Henderson family gatherings, events, or private residences. Any attempts to contact your children, grandchildren, or their associates will be considered harassment and may result in legal action, including a restraining order. Please govern yourself accordingly. Respectfully, Mark Denning, Eschewer's attorney for Mr. Tyler Henderson. I sat frozen, the words burning into me. My son, my own flesh and blood, had hired an attorney to keep me away from my family. The date at the top of the letter caught my eye, December 10th. That same morning, as if to twist the knife deeper, I saw a post from Emma on social media, a photo of her, Tyler, and their families in front of a glowing Christmas tree. The caption read, "Family-only Christmas this year. So much to be grateful for." I stared at the screen until the edges blurred, my heart cracking in quiet, deliberate pieces. My children hadn't just abandoned me. They had erased me. But as I folded the letter back into its envelope, one thought rose above the grief, sharp, defiant, unshakable. This wasn't over. Not yet. December 11th, 14 days until Christmas. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest until it hurts. Outside, snow had started to fall, soft, delicate flakes settling over the porch steps, the mailbox, the empty flower pots I never brought inside. Each flake seemed to whisper of a season meant for family, warmth, belonging, all things I no longer had. I spent that morning staring at the letter from Tyler's lawyer, reading it again and again, as if the words might suddenly rearrange themselves into something less cruel. But they didn't. Every time I saw my own name beside the word restraining order, my throat tightened. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer. Maggie? Dorothy's voice filled the line, steady, warm, the same voice that had anchored me since all this began. Yes, I whispered. I'm coming over, she said firmly. And before you tell me not to, save your breath. Within 20 minutes, she was at my door, her cheeks pink from the cold, her scarf trailing snowflakes. She set down a thermos and 2 mugs on the counter like she was coming to fix the world. Drink this, she said, pouring me a cup of peppermint cocoa. And listen. I sat silent. You've spent 40 years teaching children in this town, Dorothy began, her voice growing stronger. You've helped families through funerals, through births, through everything in between. You read to kids at the library, you cooked for the food drives, you never once turned your back on anyone who needed you. Now it's time this town remembers who you are. I shook my head. Dorothy, please. I don't want pity. I don't want people whispering behind my back about the woman whose own children abandoned her. I couldn't bear it. She leaned forward, her eyes soft but unyielding. We're not asking for help. We're giving you something. You deserve a celebration, a real one. The kind that reminds you how loved you are. I laughed weakly, though tears threatened to spill. Dorothy, you're out of your mind. Probably, she said with a small smile. But that's never stopped me before. Later that day, I didn't know exactly what she was doing, but I saw her on her phone for hours, whispering in that conspiratorial tone she used when organizing her famous library bake sales. She was unstoppable, and she didn't tell me a word. The next morning, while I was sorting through old photo albums, she called again, her voice brimming with something electric. Maggie, she said, you might want to sit down for this. Dorothy. I contacted some people, she interrupted. Just a few at first. Your old students, families you've helped, folks from church, the library volunteers. I told them the truth, that you'll be alone this Christmas, that your children, well, that they've lost their way. I didn't give details, just enough. I closed my eyes, heart thudding. Dorothy. I told them Maggie Sullivan would never ask for help. But I am. Can we show her she's loved? There was silence for a moment before she added, the response has been overwhelming. Over 100 people want to do something. They're calling it Christmas with Maggie. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. 100? More, probably, she said. We're planning it here, at your house, Christmas Day. I'll take care of everything. Decorations, food, music, the works. You just show up. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I wasn't used to that kind of love. Love that came without conditions, without guilt. For so long, my worth had been tied to the roles I played. Mother, wife, caretaker. Now suddenly I was simply me, and that was enough for them. But even as gratitude filled me, another thought began to take root, sharper, colder. Tyler and Emma had believed a stranger over me. They had severed every bond, manipulated by a woman whose greed had poisoned everything. And while Dorothy worked on giving me a miracle, I needed to uncover the truth, not out of revenge, but out of justice. That night, I sat at my dining table surrounded by papers, printouts of emails, bank notices, the trust letter, screenshots of Veronica's so-called financial consulting business. Every lie my children had told, every manipulation Veronica had orchestrated, I documented meticulously. I contacted a local attorney, Mr. Harold Peters, a quiet man with silver hair and kind eyes. When I explained the situation, he listened without interruption. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mrs. Sullivan, based on what you're describing, there may be grounds for contesting the trust distribution." I frowned. "Contest it, but it's Robert's children who were named beneficiaries." "Yes," he said, "but you're his surviving spouse. If there's evidence of undue influence, manipulation, or fraud, you have standing. Especially if this Veronica Chase influenced their decisions under false pretenses." He handed me a folder. "Gather everything you can. If what you're saying is true, your husband's legacy was corrupted, and the law takes that seriously." I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months: strength. For the next week, my days were divided between two worlds. In one, I quietly prepared for a Christmas I didn't feel worthy of. Dorothy's secret miracle gathering that was growing bigger by the day. In the other, I built a case, piece by piece, against the lies that had shattered my family. Dorothy became my rock through it all. We spent late nights baking cookies for the event, laughing like we hadn't in years, while she teased me for my inability to keep icing from dripping off the edges. "You're supposed to frost the cookies, not baptize them," she joked. Sometimes, between laughter and exhaustion, I caught her looking at me with something like pride. "You're coming back to life, Maggie," she said one night. "I can see it." Maybe she was right. Maybe for the first time, I was standing up for myself, not through bitterness, but through quiet courage. But as the days ticked closer to Christmas, I couldn't shake the ache in my heart. No matter what happened with the trust or the case, I wanted my children back. I wanted to look Tyler in the eye and ask, why? On December 20th, that wish came true, but not the way I imagined. I was in the kitchen, rolling out dough for gingerbread cookies, when I heard a knock at the door. A firm, deliberate knock, not the tentative kind of a friend, but the confident rap of someone who felt entitled to entry. When I opened it, the cold air swept in, and there stood Tyler. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. My son, my firstborn, the boy I once carried on my hip, the man I hadn't seen since Thanksgiving morning. His face was pale, his jaw tense, his eyes distant. "Tyler," I breathed. "Oh my God, you're here." He gave a curt nod, stepping past me without being invited, his gaze sweeping the room as if looking for something. "I didn't expect," I began. "Mom," he interrupted, "I don't have much time. I just need you to sign something. It's a formality about Dad's estate, nothing major. Can you do that without making it difficult?" His tone was clipped, rehearsed, the kind of tone that belonged to a man under someone else's influence. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Tyler, what is this about?" "It's just paperwork," he said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "A few signatures to close the trust properly. Veronica said it would make things smoother for everyone." There it was again. Veronica. I felt the air grow thin between us. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the papers he held. The edges were crisp, professional, the kind of legal language meant to confuse. He set them on the table, tapping the top page impatiently. "It's just a formality, Mom. Don't overthink it." But I was already reading, and what I saw made my stomach twist. Something wasn't right. The papers sat on the kitchen table like a silent accusation, their crisp edges cutting across the quiet of the room. Tyler's hand lingered near them, as if daring me to take them, to comply, to become someone I no longer recognized. "Just sign it, Mom," he said, his voice flat, businesslike, "unless you want to prove everyone right about you being controlling." I stared at him. The boy I had held when he was small, the one who had once clung to my neck after nightmares, the one whose laughter had filled these very walls, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man molded by someone else's whisper, someone whose influence had transformed him into a cold, calculating version of himself. My hands shook, my chest tight. The papers felt heavy, heavier than any legal document should. They weren't just pages. They were a betrayal wrapped in formal language, a cruel cage designed to strip me of my voice and my rights. To sign them would be to hand over my dignity, to bow to a stranger's manipulation. I need to read it properly, I said, my voice quivering but firm. Give me a few days. Tyler's jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the sun I remembered, a boy trying to push back against the strings that pulled him. Then the mask returned. "We get the money on the 26th, he said sharply. "I need this signed by the 24th, or Veronica says there could be complications." The name hit me like a punch to the stomach. Veronica, the orchestrator of my family's fracture, the shadow that had whispered poison into my children's ears, had her hand in every move Tyler made. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him awake to the truth, but instead I simply nodded, hiding the storm that raged behind my eyes. After he left, the door shutting behind him felt like a final judgment. I sank to the floor, leaning against the cold cabinet, and the tears came, silent at first, then shaking, uncontrolled sobs that racked my body. My children had chosen greed over love, had traded decades of shared history for the hollow promises of a stranger. I cried until I was exhausted, until the room seemed to breathe with me, until the very walls carried the weight of my heartbreak. And then something shifted. Anger, raw and righteous, surged through me. Not the destructive anger that destroys, but the kind that fuels action, clarity, and determination. Dorothy arrived without warning, as if she sensed I had reached the breaking point. Her arms were full of papers and a tablet, and the spark in her eyes made my chest lift despite the heaviness. "I have something you need to see," she said, voice low and urgent. She played a recording on the tablet. The room, once filled with my grief, now held the undeniable truth. Jake, my 12-year-old grandson, had secretly recorded a conversation between Tyler, Emma, and Veronica. Every carefully orchestrated manipulation was laid bare. Emma's voice, hesitant, tinged with guilt, floated through the room. "I feel terrible, but Veronica's right. If we stay close to Mom, she'll expect us to help her, share with her. We can reconnect after... maybe." Tyler's voice followed, cold and decisive. "Mom's tough. She'll be fine. And we deserve this money. Dad's brother never gave us anything when he was alive." I sat frozen, my heart breaking and burning at the same time. My children, my own flesh and blood, had been convinced to see me not as a mother, a grandmother, a woman who had devoted her life to family and community, but as an obstacle, a threat to the inheritance, and all of it orchestrated by a predator who profited from their fear and misguided loyalty. This was my evidence, proof that my children's actions weren't born of malice alone, but had been cultivated by deception and greed. Dorothy placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Maggie, this changes everything. You don't have to beg for justice. You have it in your hands, and you can do it without anger. Do it with love. Show this town who you really are." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. I would not sign those papers. I would not let them steal my voice or my truth. And I would not warn them about the miracle that Dorothy had orchestrated for Christmas. They would see it as it was meant to be, untainted by their manipulations. The days that followed were a blur of preparation, documentation, and quiet determination. I met with my lawyer again, compiling records, letters, and the recording from Jake. Every piece of evidence felt like a step back toward myself, a reclamation of the mother, grandmother, and woman I had almost been forced to doubt. Then came Christmas Eve. The snow was falling thickly now, a quiet blanket over Maplewood that mirrored the calm before the storm. I was putting the final touches on decorations. Small lights twinkling in the windows, wreaths hanging just so, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the house, when I noticed headlights across the street. Through the frosted glass of Veronica's office, I saw Tyler's car parked outside. My heart twisted. I pressed my face against the cold pane, squinting through the snow and shadows. And then I saw it. Veronica, Tyler, embracing. Not a friendly handshake, not a brief, comforting touch, but something intimate, something entirely inappropriate. The manipulation, the greed, the betrayal. It went deeper than money. Much deeper. My hands pressed against the glass, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that single image. But this time, it didn't crush me. Instead, it steeled me. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for the truth, for dignity, for the love that had been stolen from me, but could not be destroyed. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, fierce, relentless, but alive with possibility. I knew in that moment that this Christmas, everything would change. Christmas morning came quietly, almost deceptively, over Maplewood. The sky was pale with the first light of dawn, soft pinks and grays stretching across the horizon. But inside my home, silence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I sat in the armchair by the living room window, staring at the frost-covered garden, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea. The grief threatened to swallow me whole. The absence of my children, the betrayal, the lies, it all pressed in at once. For a fleeting moment, I felt utterly, irreparably alone. I took a slow breath, letting it out with a trembling sigh. My eyes stung as tears threatened to spill, the raw ache of abandonment squeezing my heart, just as I began to feel the despair might anchor me in its darkness. There was a knock at the door. A familiar voice, full of warmth and determination, cut through the quiet. "Maggie, get up, Maggie Henderson. Today, you're getting dressed like the queen you are. We have a lot of people coming to celebrate you." It was Dorothy, her smile radiant, her eyes sparking with mischief and purpose. She stepped inside, arms full of packages and a large, neatly folded dress. She didn't wait for a response. She simply moved in, like a force of nature that refused to let me linger in self-pity. I tried to protest, voice hoarse. "Dorothy, I don't know if I—" "No arguments," she said firmly, placing the dress in my hands. "This isn't about pity, Maggie. It's about showing them who you really are. You've spent 40 years teaching children, helping families, volunteering without ever asking for anything in return. Today, it's your turn to be celebrated. Now come on." Her hands were gentle but insistent as she helped me into the emerald green dress she had picked. The fabric was soft, luxurious, shimmering slightly in the morning light, and it made me feel powerful, almost regal. Dorothy combed and styled my hair, teased it slightly at the roots to frame my face, and applied just enough makeup to bring warmth back to my pale cheeks. I stared at my reflection and barely recognized myself. Not as a lonely, abandoned woman, but as someone resilient, someone still beautiful, someone worthy. By 10 a.m., the first sounds of Christmas began to reach my ears. A faint ringing at the doorbell, then another and another. Dorothy beamed at me. "They're here, Maggie. They're coming to show you love, not obligation. Let them in." I opened the door to the first arrival. Michael, a former student of mine, now a strong, kind firefighter, smiling broadly as he ushered his entire family inside. They carried gifts and baskets of homemade treats. Seeing his children's wide, curious eyes made my chest tighten. I remembered teaching Michael to read, helping him through long afternoons filled with laughter, mistakes, and triumphs. And now he had come back, grown, successful, and yet still tethered to the bond we had formed years ago. Next came the Rodriguez family, whose daughter I had tutored for free for 2 years, helping her catch up when school felt impossible. Their smiles were shy but eager, their arms laden with wrapped presents and carefully prepared casseroles. Sarah Chen followed, carrying a tray of cookies, her mother's favorite recipe, and she whispered, "Your kindness to my mom. It never left us." The parade of familiar faces kept coming, one family, one former student, one neighbor after another. By noon, my house had become a flood of love, overflowing with over 150 people. Every surface was covered with food, gifts, decorations, and little details that spoke of personal care. Hand-knitted scarves, personalized cards, jars of homemade preserves. The music, a gentle, nostalgic Christmas playlist, floated through the rooms, warming the space with the laughter and chatter of people who genuinely cared. I tried to speak, to express my gratitude, but words failed me. Tears rolled freely down my cheeks, and the warmth of the crowd pressed against my heart like a comforting embrace. I felt overwhelmed in a way that was unfamiliar. Not the hollow ache of grief or betrayal, but a full-bodied, soul-deep joy. Dorothy leaned close and whispered, her voice almost a prayer, "Your children said no one loves you. Let them see how wrong they are." Her words hung in the air, a quiet promise I clung to, a shield against the ghosts of abandonment. And then, as if the universe wanted to punctuate the miracle of the morning, there was a sudden shift in the atmosphere outside. At 2 p.m., the faint hum of engines reached my ears, and the sound of tires crunching on snow signaled something, or someone. I peeked through the frosted windowpane and saw a car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. Tyler and Emma. Their faces, pale with shock, stared at the sprawling crowd in front of my house. Cars lined the street, windows fogged with condensation, laughter and music drifting into the cold air. They weren't alone. The unmistakable figure of Veronica Chase was with them, her expression tight, furious, calculating. My chest constricted at the sight, a mixture of fear, anger, and anticipation surging through me. For a moment, I simply watched. The faces of my children, the ones who had once been my whole world, contorted with emotions I couldn't yet name. Disbelief, shame, panic, confusion. They were confronted not by the empty house they had abandoned, not by a mother they had manipulated and maligned, but by the embodiment of a life I had quietly built in the shadows of their betrayal, a life filled with love, devotion, and community. I straightened in my emerald green dress, feeling the quiet pulse of confidence, of resilience, of quiet power. The house that had once felt suffocatingly silent now roared with life, warmth, and truth. My heart thumped, a mixture of exhilaration and dread, as I knew the confrontation, inevitable, monumental, was about to begin. Dorothy touched my shoulder gently. "They're about to see what you always knew. Love can't be bought, and it can't be controlled. It's alive, Maggie. And today, they're going to feel it." I inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of pine and cookies and the subtle sparkle of lights reflecting in my tear-filled eyes. Today, the story would change. Today, the truth would rise like the dawn. And outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and persistent, blanketing Maplewood in purity. As if the world itself was conspiring to give me this moment of triumph, this miracle of love realized in the face of betrayal. The room shifted as Tyler and Emma pushed their way through the crowd, their expressions a mixture of shock, guilt, and something else I couldn't yet name: fear. The festive chatter dimmed around them as people instinctively stepped aside, giving the siblings a path to the center of my living room. My chest tightened, a mix of anticipation and dread pulsing through my veins. But I refused to let it show. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and waited for them to speak. Emma reached me first, her small hand finding mine. Her grip was hesitant, almost fragile, as if she weren't sure whether she had permission to exist in my presence. Her voice trembled, and her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Mom, what is all this? Why are all these people here?" I let a soft, calm smile curve my lips. There was no bitterness in my voice, only quiet dignity. "They came to spend Christmas with me. Since my own children told me no one loved me, the town decided to prove otherwise." Emma blinked, confusion etched across her face. Tyler, standing a few steps behind her, went red, his jaw tightening, as if my words burned through him. "You're manipulating people, making us look bad," he spat, his voice sharp, defensive, almost venomous. Dorothy stepped forward from behind me, her posture protective and unwavering. "No, Tyler, that's what you did. You told your mother she was unloved and abandoned her. These people came because they actually care. They're here because of her, not you." The room went still, the weight of Dorothy's words settling on Tyler like a physical force. Veronica, her sharp heels clicking against the hardwood, stepped forward with her usual air of control, trying to assert dominance. "This is a private family matter." "And who are you?" Michael, the firefighter and former student, spoke up, his voice low, protective yet calm, cutting through her veneer. His eyes were steady, fierce with loyalty to me. "Who are you to interfere in this family?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, but my voice firm and steady, carrying across the room. "This is Veronica Chase, a financial advisor who convinced my children to abandon me so she could secure a commission on their inheritance." The room went silent. Even the soft rustle of coats and the faint ticking of the mantel clock disappeared. People stared, frozen, absorbing the revelation. I saw disbelief flash across faces I had known for decades. Emma's brow furrowed, confusion and hurt clouding her expression. "That's not... Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly, Emma," I interrupted gently, but without wavering. "I found the letters. I heard the recordings. I know about the $2-3 million you're getting tomorrow." Tyler's face drained of color, the red that had flared moments before, leaving him pale, almost ghostly. "How do you..." he stammered, the words caught somewhere between panic and denial. "And I know about your affair with Veronica," I said clearly, my voice cold but composed, every syllable deliberate. The room collectively inhaled, the shock reverberating through the crowd like a thunderclap. Rachel, Tyler's wife, gasped audibly. I could see her realization hit like a hammer, the betrayal, the manipulation, and the lies she had never known. Her eyes widened in disbelief, scanning Tyler's face for answers he had none to give. Tyler's entire world seemed to crumble before my eyes. His shoulders slumped, the facade of control and composure shredded in an instant. Veronica's jaw tightened, the confidence that had once made her impervious suddenly faltering. The threads of their manipulation were exposed, and the careful narrative they had spun unraveled in the presence of truth, courage, and community. Emma began to shake, tears spilling freely now. The confusion, the hurt, the guilt, it all cascaded out of her like a torrent. Her small body shook against Tyler's side, clinging to him even as the reality of the situation pressed down. Suddenly, a small, urgent voice broke through the cacophony of shock and emotion. "Grandma! Grandma!" Jake, my grandson, had pushed his way through the crowd, his small face determined, his eyes wide with urgency. "I need to tell you something about Grandpa's letters. Dad burned them. He burned all the letters Grandpa left for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. My knees weakened, and I grasped the back of a chair for support. My heart ached, not just for the letters lost, but for the betrayal woven into every calculated action. Every shred of trust I had held for my children, the belief that love and family came first, had been tested, twisted, and nearly broken. The room erupted into chaos. Rachel confronted Tyler, her voice a mixture of fury and hurt. Emma collapsed in sobs, shaking in disbelief. Veronica tried to assert herself, her voice sharp and demanding, but the authority she had wielded so easily just hours before had evaporated. Even Tyler seemed paralyzed, caught between self-preservation and the undeniable exposure of his own actions. I stood there, emerald green dress glimmering in the soft light, my hands trembling slightly, my chest tight, but my spirit resolute. I had been abandoned, lied to, and manipulated. But in this moment, surrounded by the people who had chosen love over obligation, I realized something profound. I was no longer alone. The betrayal had been exposed, the lies laid bare, and yet the love of those around me held firm, unshakable. Dorothy stepped beside me, her hand brushing mine in silent solidarity. The room's energy shifted, heavy tension mixing with quiet triumph. I could see it in the eyes of everyone present, recognition of truth, loyalty to goodness, the power of love standing stronger than greed, manipulation, or deceit. And outside, the snow continued to fall softly, blanketing Maplewood in purity, as if the world itself had paused to witness this reckoning. The room was a storm. Voices rose and fell like crashing waves, shouts of accusation, sobs of guilt, and stifled gasps mingling in a cacophony of emotion. Rachel's voice rang out sharp and piercing, confronting Tyler with every ounce of disbelief and fury she could muster. "Tyler, how could you? How could you lie to everyone and manipulate Emma, me, even the kids?" Emma was on the floor, her face buried in her hands, shaking, tears running freely down her cheeks. The sobs were guttural, wrenching, a mixture of fear, guilt, and confusion. She looked helpless, as if the weight of what had happened might crush her entirely. Veronica, sensing the tide had turned, tried to make her escape. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood as she reached the door, but the crowd's eyes were like iron, holding her in place. There was no escape from the truth she had tried so meticulously to control. Then, Jake appeared. My sweet, brave grandson, barely 12, dashed through the crowd and threw himself into my arms. "Grandma, Grandma, I saw them, before Thanksgiving. Dad and Aunt Emma found a box of letters in the attic. They were from Grandpa to you. Dad read them and got really mad, and then he burned them all." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. My knees felt weak, my heart clutched in invisible hands. Robert had left me words, pieces of himself, pieces of his love that I would never hold. Letters written with care, messages meant to comfort me, to guide me, to let me know I mattered. And they were gone, burned, destroyed, stolen from me by the very people who should have cherished me most. I looked at Tyler, my voice rising, steel hard, yet tinged with heartbreak. "So you burned my last words from my husband to keep them from me?" Tyler's eyes flickered with a mixture of defensiveness and shame. "Those letters, Dad talked about the trust, about leaving everything to us, not you. He said you'd be taken care of by us, that we should use the money to build our futures." The words barely registered. They were hollow excuses, feeble attempts to justify an unforgivable act. My hands trembled slightly, but my gaze remained unflinching. This was not about money anymore. This was about betrayal, about love turned into ashes, about a family's moral compass twisted by greed. Emma lifted her tear-streaked face, finally finding the courage to speak. Her voice quivered, but held a thread of honesty I had been waiting for. "Mom, one of the letters. Dad wrote that he was worried. He said he made mistakes in your marriage, that he didn't appreciate you enough, and he wanted to make sure we took care of you. But Veronica said—" I cut in, my voice sharp, commanding. Veronica said what? Veronica's lips pressed into a thin line, her calculated calm cracking just slightly. "I told them the truth," she said finally, her voice cold and measured, trying to regain control. "Money changes relationships. Family obligations drain wealth. They needed to protect their inheritance from anyone who might claim they deserved a share." Dorothy, steady and fierce beside me, pulled out her phone and held it high. including through an affair with a married beneficiary to ensure your commission? Because we have photos, Veronica. Dates, times, hotel receipts. Veronica's face paled, her composure splintering as she stammered, You can't prove—" A calm, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Actually, we can." It was Mr. James Walsh, my attorney, whom I had quietly invited as a guest earlier that day. He stepped forward, holding a stack of neatly organized documents, his presence commanding respect. Veronica Chase has defrauded 3 other families in similar circumstances. There is an active investigation ongoing. Tyler, Emma, your mother has grounds to contest the trust distribution based on undue influence. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the children watching from the periphery held their breath, sensing the weight of what had just been revealed. Emma collapsed completely, the tears flowing unchecked. "Oh, God, what have we done?" she cried, her voice barely more than a whisper, shattered and desperate. Tyler, however, remained defiant. His posture rigid, his jaw clenched, he glared at me with unmasked hatred. "You can't prove anything. The money transfers tomorrow morning, and there's nothing you can do about it." He leaned closer, his eyes dark with accusation. "You're trying to take our inheritance because you're bitter and alone. Dad wanted us to have this, not you." I held his gaze, steady, unshaken. My voice, though soft, carried the weight of truth and years of unyielding love. "Tyler, you've misunderstood entirely. I'm not trying to take anything from you. What I am doing is reclaiming the dignity, respect, and truth that was stolen from me. I'm standing for what is right, not for greed, not for money, but for love and justice." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, a mixture of shock and disbelief written across her face. Emma's tears slicked down her cheeks as she struggled to process the avalanche of truth. Veronica's carefully constructed world collapsed piece by piece, and Tyler's pride and anger were powerless against the overwhelming force of evidence, community support, and morality. I could feel the strength of the room behind me, neighbors, former students, friends who had gathered not for wealth or obligation, but for love. Their quiet, unwavering support was a current that ran through me, reinforcing the courage I never thought I could summon. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe, fully and deeply, letting the shock and sorrow wash over me, knowing that in the midst of devastation, truth had arrived. The battle was far from over, but the veil of deception had been torn aside. I was no longer alone, and I was no longer silenced. The aftermath of Christmas was a quiet storm. The house, once brimming with music, laughter, and the comforting hum of conversation, now felt like a hollow shell. Tyler had left with Veronica, his face pale, his pride bruised, while Rachel, furious and heartbroken, had hurled her wedding ring at him in a moment of raw, unfiltered emotion. Emma stayed behind, sobbing into my shoulder, clinging to what little sense of security remained after days of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. In the days that followed, the city seemed to move in slow motion, each morning dragging into the next. I went through the motions of life mechanically, washing dishes, walking through snow-dusted streets, running my fingers over Robert's chair at the kitchen table, tracing the memories of decades gone by. But underneath it all, there was a burning need for clarity, for truth, for the assurance that what I had fought for, my dignity, my love, my family, was not completely lost. One afternoon, Emma came to me quietly, knocking softly before entering. She looked like a child caught in the wrong story, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her hands trembling. "Mom," she began, voice wavering, "I never wanted this. Tyler, he convinced me that you'd try to control how we spent the money, that you'd guilt us. I was weak. I'm so sorry." Her words pierced me, a sharp combination of relief and lingering pain. My body wanted to recoil, to guard against further hurt, but I saw the genuine remorse in her gaze, the vulnerability of a daughter finally willing to admit her mistakes. I pulled her into an embrace, holding her as she shook with sobs, feeling the raw weight of regret mingling with the warmth of familial love. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of Veronica's deceit were beginning to surface elsewhere. Rachel, after gathering herself, contacted me, her voice shaking yet hopeful. "Maggie, I had no idea about any of this. Tyler's been different for months, and I feel like I've been blind. Can the kids and can we spend New Year's with you?" Her words were tentative, seeking permission and connection, and I felt a surge of protective love for these grandchildren who had been unwittingly pulled into a storm not of their making. "Of course," I whispered, my own tears forming. "Of course you can." The town's support, which had already been so profoundly moving on Christmas, did not waver. Dorothy, my stalwart friend and the unyielding champion of my dignity, organized a legal fund, contacting neighbors, friends, and even former students now grown with families of their own. Each donation was more than money. It was a vote of confidence, a tangible expression of belief in justice and in me. Together, we began the painstaking process of documenting every misstep, every manipulation, every lie that Veronica and Tyler had orchestrated. My attorney, Mr. Walsh, unearthed a critical piece of information that turned the tide further in my favor. Robert's brother's will explicitly stated that his inheritance should support the family, including Robert's widow Maggie. Tyler and Veronica had deliberately excluded me, violating the clear, written intent of the trust. The realization filled me with righteous indignation, but also a strange sense of vindication. Justice, however delayed, was within reach. By December 30th, the courts issued a temporary injunction halting the distribution pending investigation. Tyler's fury was palpable when he learned, his voice icy and venomous over the phone. "I'll never speak to you again, Mom. You've ruined everything," I breathed, finally feeling the power of standing firm. When Emma sought me out, anxious and fragile, I held her gaze. "Emma," I said gently, but with unshakable resolve, "I don't want the money. I never did. I wanted my children. I wanted my family. But I will not allow you to be manipulated by that woman either. You must see clearly. You must choose wisely." And then New Year's Eve arrived. The town rallied once more, organizing a Maggie's Triumph celebration at the community center. I stood at my front door, watching snowflakes drift lazily through the air, a quiet contrast to the storm of events that had just passed. Dorothy appeared, radiant and supportive, holding out a shimmering silver gown she had prepared for me. "You deserve this, Maggie," she said softly. "Tonight, you are seen, truly seen." Dressed and prepared, my hair styled beautifully, I walked into the community center to a chorus of cheers. The room was a tapestry of gratitude, love, and celebration. Lights twinkled like stars, music played softly yet jubilantly, and the aroma of 100 dishes of food filled the air. Faces familiar and cherished surrounded me, each reflecting appreciation for the decades I had dedicated to nurturing, teaching, and loving this community. Dorothy stepped forward to give a toast, her voice ringing with sincerity. "To Maggie Henderson, who taught us that dignity, grace, and love will always triumph over greed." The applause was deafening, yet tender. I felt tears streaming down my face, not of sadness, but of the deep, cathartic joy of recognition and validation. I was beautiful. I was powerful. I was worthy. And most importantly, I was loved. But even in this moment of triumph, life had another twist in store. As the clock edged closer to midnight and the crowd counted down, the doors burst open. Tyler stumbled in, disheveled, desperate, eyes wide with panic. Mom, you have to help me. Veronica's gone. She took money from my accounts, she's disappeared, and the police are looking for her for fraud. Everything's gone wrong, and I need my mother. Please." The room froze. Gasps, whispers, and stunned silence spread like wildfire. Tyler, the man who had once called me controlling and unloved, was now standing broken at my feet, stripped of pride, forced to confront the consequences of his choices. And in that instant, I understood. The wheel of justice, slow and deliberate, had turned. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and with it, the possibility of true redemption. The music, the laughter, the hum of celebration, it all died in an instant as Tyler stood in the center of the community center, frozen, disheveled, broken. The room was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest, waiting for words that might never come. For a brief, fleeting moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who had held my hand tightly in the hospital after his father died, who had cried when life felt unbearably unfair. But that vision was clouded by the man he had become, the man who had chosen cruelty over love, greed over family, lies over truth. I took a steadying breath and walked toward him. Every eye in the room followed me. Neighbors, former students, families I had helped, friends who had come to celebrate me. I felt the weight of all those eyes, yet also the warmth of their silent support. When I reached him, I placed a hand lightly on his shoulder and spoke softly, yet with absolute certainty. "Tyler," I said, my voice steady, "I love you. I always have, and I always will. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean rescuing you from consequences. It means seeing you for who you are and holding you accountable." He collapsed to his knees, his shoulders shaking, his face wet with tears. "Mom," he whispered, voice raw and broken, "I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything. My marriage, my relationship with you, my children. I let greed and Veronica's lies poison me. I burned Dad's letters because I was afraid he loved you more, afraid I wasn't enough, afraid of not being rich enough to matter." The words cut into me like a knife, yet I didn't recoil. Instead, I felt the clarity of truth, the final unmasking of all that had been hidden. I knelt beside him, holding his hands, feeling the tremor of his guilt, but also the fragile beginnings of hope. "Tyler," I said softly, "your father loved you completely, and so do I. But you need to rebuild yourself now. You need to face what you've done. Only then can you be the man you're meant to be." Emma stepped forward, tentative at first, then boldly taking Tyler's hand. Her own tears flowed freely, mingling with his, as the family I had longed for began to slowly stitch itself back together. The following months were a careful, painstaking dance of justice, healing, and reclamation. Veronica was arrested, her network of scams revealed to have defrauded 5 other families, with total theft exceeding $1. $5 million. The trust was finally distributed correctly. Tyler and Emma each received $800,000, while the court decreed that $700,000, the portion Robert's brother intended for me, was to be delivered to me as Robert's widow. I immediately established a scholarship fund in Robert's name, ensuring that his legacy of care, education, and community support would continue to touch lives beyond our own. Tyler entered therapy, confronting years of manipulation, shame, and misguided choices. It was slow, painful, and humbling, but genuine. Rachel, witnessing Tyler's transformation, allowed supervised visits with the grandchildren, eventually granting him limited custody, and Emma and I rebuilt our relationship by volunteering together at the library, relearning what truly mattered. By the next Thanksgiving, we gathered for a modest family dinner. No fanfare, no crowd of strangers, just us. Me, Emma, her family, Rachel, the grandchildren, and Tyler, arriving with a year of sobriety, humility, and a willingness to make amends. Tyler held something in his hand, a small envelope. "Mom," he said softly, "I kept one thing I shouldn't have, one of Dad's letters. I couldn't burn this one." I opened it, hands trembling. It was from Robert. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But know this, you were the best thing in my life. My only regret is not telling you enough. Take care of our children, but take care of yourself too. You deserve every happiness. All my love, always, Robert." Tears streamed down my face, this time healing tears. The letter was a final bridge, a promise from the past affirming that love had never abandoned me, and that it never would. The town's embrace of me continued. I was honored as Citizen of the Year for decades of volunteer work, and Dorothy and I launched a support group for people experiencing family estrangement, helping them navigate the treacherous waters of betrayal and rediscovery. Christmas came again, a year later, but this time it was quiet, intimate, and perfect in its simplicity. I hosted a dinner for my family: Tyler, Rebuilding, Emma, Rachel, and my 4 grandchildren. There was no crowd, no overwhelming spectacle, just love, patience, and the warmth of shared hearts. Jake, now 13, raised his glass for a toast. To Grandma Maggie, who taught us that love is stronger than money and forgiveness is stronger than revenge. As I looked around the table at the faces of my family, flawed, human, yet present, I realized the profound truth. I never needed revenge. I needed truth. In seeking it, I had found myself again. Tyler leaned forward quietly. "Mom, I can't undo what I did, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know you're loved." I smiled at him, at Emma, at the grandchildren, and then at the life that had carried me through betrayal, grief, and loss. "I already know, sweetheart." The whole town made sure of that. Later that night, alone in the quiet of my house, I found a Christmas card slipped beneath my door. I opened it to discover the signatures of over 200 people from the community. The message read simply, "Maggie, you taught us to read. You taught us to care. You taught us what love really means. Thank you for being our teacher, our friend, our inspiration. You are loved. You always were. You always will be. Your Maplewood family." I placed the card next to Robert's letter, a quiet smile spreading across my face. Looking out the window at the snow-covered town, I felt a deep, abiding peace. I had survived betrayal, chosen dignity over bitterness, and built a life filled with genuine love. Not because of wealth, not because of obligation, but because of who I chose to be when tested. In that moment, I understood fully. Love, truth, and resilience could heal even the deepest wounds. If you've been inspired by Maggie's story of courage, resilience, and love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible, real-life stories that remind us of the power of family, community, and forgiveness.